Welcome to Bleach Revisited. I am Karakura Gold, your host of this series in which we will be reading all of the Bleach manga, providing critical analysis of the art and narrative, personal response, as well as discussion as how these chapters connect to the rest of the series. As usual, we will begin with a reading of the chapter that we are currently on. This is chapter 52, Needless Emotions. Capture or kill! Rukia Kuchiki, we found you. Bleach, Chapter 52, Needless Emotions. So, do you like Ichigo? Yes? Seriously, what's between you two? We're just friends. Mahana, gosh, you're tactless. Whatever. You're all dying to know, but none of you had the guts to ask. I didn't want to know. You wouldn't. You hate Ichigo, Michiru. Really? No, I don't hate him, Orihime. I just think his face is kind of scary. Who cares what you think? This has nothing to do with you. It's all about me and Orihime. What do you have to do with it? What do you think? If Rukia gets Ichigo, I'll have Orihime all to myself. So good luck, Rukia. I'm rooting for you, and Orihime will be mine. All mine. Chizuru, you poor thing. Why does she have to talk like that in public? Well, what's going on? You've been clinging to him ever since you got here. Are you and Ichigo an item? Ichigo is just a friend. Love, romance. I think that stuff's boring. Huh? For real? Sure. You don't have any feelings for him? Nope. Not even a little? No. Even less than a cuticle of my pinky. Feelings of attachment, affection, friendship, it's all boring. I see. Well, that's disappointing. If you liked Ichigo, it would have been two girls against one guy, and we would have won. She's talking nonsense again. Orihime, having more people works for martial arts team matches and stuff, but that's not how it works in love. You following me? I get it! A triangle, right? Only in this case it's the side with the fewest that wins. So if it's two girls and one guy, the guy wins. Do you hear what you're saying? Oh, but if that happens, what should I do? I could dress up like a boy and team up with Ichigo. Maybe get a fake mustache? Shut up! No! I should just stab Ichigo and take his place. Die! Die! Die again! You're like a rabid animal. If eventually I must leave this place, friendship and affection will only make it difficult. Friendship is really, really boring. And then there's jealousy. None of them are necessary emotions for a soul reaper. They're burdensome, Rukia Kuchiki. I may have stayed too long in this world. Yes, you're quite right. But then, because you stayed too long, you got to live a little longer than you would have, Rukia. You, Renji Abarai? Hunters from the Soul Society are on your heels, and you're so lost in thought that you didn't notice? I realize you're an Ikigai, but it only took you a couple of months to completely lose your edge. Talk, Rukia. Where's the human who stole your powers? What are you talking about? Just because I'm an Ikigai doesn't mean my powers were stolen. And how dare you suggest that a human could take them from me? It was a human. That's why you have that human expression on your face. I grew up in the Rukon district, but I was taken in by the illustrious and noble Kuchiki family. Rukia Kuchiki, you were trained to be a Soul Reaper. You're not allowed to wear a human expression. Right, Captain Kuchiki? Byakuya. Brother. Rukia. The transfer of Soul Reaper abilities is a grave offense. The High Ones were kind enough to entrust us with the execution instead of the police. Now, tell us where the human is, Rukia. We want the human who captured you and stole your powers to kill him. Don't try to protect him. You know, don't you? My sword strokes, you didn't evade them. I let you evade them. This time, I'll cut you. Two armed men against one defenseless girl. What's this world coming to? That kind of thing really makes me mad. Who are you? Just a classmate? One that hates Soul Reapers. To be continued in Volume 7. Oh well, I guess I'll eat it, even though I'm not really hungry. That is it for this volume. Looks like there is no end of volume extra bonuses. At the very least, they are not in the scans that I have, which is unfortunate. I don't know if that was the case for the actual volume. I've read all of the collected manga as well, at least as far as, I was reading the actual publications in English. I think I stopped around, one of the later arcs and just kind of exclusively read the Japanese release, as it was being translated kind of weekly. Anyway, whew, what a chapter, huh? Quite a lot going on in this one. So there's a lot to talk about, both art and narrative-wise, because there's quite a lot of pretty great stuff. So we come back to, I guess, to say we're getting into the analysis and the response for this chapter, by the by. Second part of these videos is always that. If you've watched any of these, you know what to expect. Anyway, I'll try to get into analysis more than response first. It's typically how I hit it. But yeah, we're coming into this from the previous chapter where we know that these two Soul Reapers, who we have now come to learn are Renji and Byakuya, they are both pursuing Rukia, right? They have these orders to either capture her or kill her. And obviously they both have a connection to her, so you think that they would capture her, right? But, it is a pretty significant sentence. I think that we get this image of Rukia, in her Shinigami robes. It's the image that they have of her, and then we have her kind of fleeing here. I don't really know what, you're thinking about, like, what was Rukia's plan, right? Because she's not going to avoid these Soul Reapers. She knows that they're coming for her. I guess the idea is that she just didn't want this conflict to happen around Ichigo, We talked about that a little bit last chapter, how a lot of what was going on was really Rukia trying to kind of protect Ichigo from this encounter, and to keep him from getting involved in these larger kind of issues. But here, we have her escaping. We know this conflict's going to happen. We get our Soul Reapers from before, the same kind of poses that they were in, where Byakuya is standing up and Renji is kind of slumped over, kind of crouching, right? We get the moon. So this is exactly like the shot from before, but it's telescoped out, which is fantastic. It's really good. Kind of can read really, really well in sequence to what you had the previous chapter or previous week, right? And of course, we get our usual power lines and moon, supernatural shenanigans afoot in an urban environment. Yet again, I think it's no surprise why Renji is coupled with Byakuya, because Renji is very much this very loud personality, right? He's got facial tattoos that creep down his neck. He's got this crazy, red pineapple looking hair. He has very exaggerated expressions. Whenever I thought about where I would kind of do his voice from, because whenever I think about these voices, I don't think about doing a voice so much as like wearing my own palette that I want to kind of deliver it. And with Renji's, I always kind of think kind of like the like the Japanese sort of gangster guy, almost a parallel Ichigo in a few ways, but like that "Rah, rah, rah, rah! Come and get some. Ha! We found you." Like in like kind of back of the throat area, but very much he's juxtaposed to Byakuya. We're meant to get these two characters, one that's kind of a little bit more rough around the edges, wilder in a lot of ways, and Byakuya, who is much more reserved and serious. It's interesting that they mention all this stuff about having, you know, wearing human expressions whenever they clearly have some themselves, but I think the idea is more that Rukia more clearly shows these sorts of expressions and is more sentimental than perhaps they are, whereas Byakuya has this sort of detached expression this entire time, and Renji is maybe more predatory. He sees this as, he's coming here to capture someone, kill them, like she is his prey essentially. Anyway, um, we get this chapter cover with Rukia kind of laid out across all this scrap. There's this sense of like quiet suffering almost, and we get a little bit of that in this chapter. Um, usually whenever we see Rukia, she's a lot more spirited than she is there in that chapter cover. So I think it's meant to convey a little bit of the atmosphere of what's going on here. We also have this flashback from Rukia that I think is fairly telling. If you remember, also in the previous chapter, she was invited to lunch with all the other girls, probably for the first time. Because as we know, she's been getting lunch with Ichigo and his friends, but we haven't really seen that much else of Rukia interacting with the other classmates of hers. But here she's running. We get kind of the blur of everything moving past her. We transition to flashback. I really kind of like the way that this transitions, where we have like the clear cut, like swap from night into a panel of day into a panel that follows those clouds down into like this daytime scene, and of course the white flipping to black. So again, really clearly telling us, hey, this is in flashback. This is in the past. We have these black paneled, or I guess black, backgrounded panels. So this works. I think it's really kind of stylistically interesting. Also, this panel kind of dragging off from the other side, so we get the sense of her moving in from that side. Just effective stuff, and obviously the zoom into Rukia with her eyes downcast. We're getting her reflecting on this moment, right? As she's asked if she likes Ichigo, which there's this, for those of you that care more about romance, obviously the idea of, well, we have this female character that's like pretty much been living with our male lead, what sort of feelings might be there. Which it might come as a surprise to us as much as it does to Rukia, because we haven't really gotten a lot of sentimentality between the two. A lot of the interactions that they've had have been kind of, I say professional. I mean, they've had sort of joking moments and carefree ones for sure, but a lot of the interaction between Rukia and Ichigo, other than moments where she's kind of come to understand him and sort of, in a lot of ways, come to be sympathetic towards him, especially through the Memories in the Rain arc with Grand Fisher and his own mother's death and all of that. Otherwise, though, we really haven't seen, like, sure, she's considered him more human and she's had those kind of more serious moments where she's thought about him, but it's always been in the context of battle or in soul reaper duties. It's never been in the context of romance, really. So this sort of comes out of left field for Rukia in a lot of ways, because it's maybe not even something that she considered, right? She's also, keep in mind, 150 years old. So the idea of liking a 15-year-old human, especially we're getting more and more of the sense that Soul Reapers really consider themselves to not be human. I mean, obviously, if you live in Soul Society, you have a pretty distinctly different life, even if the spirits are all the same, because it's a Soul Reaper. I mean, it's just your job. It's not like it's like you're born a Soul Reaper or anything like that. I think it's just the idea of having these extreme different classism, perhaps, and this way that we're discovering a lot of ways that Soul Reapers, as much as we felt like they honored human souls and that human souls were kind of sacrosanct in their, um, community, we're finding that they actually have a lot of disdain for the ways in which humans are, that they consider humans to be kind of weak. And they perhaps even look down upon them, um, which is, maybe a little fitting for where we had Ruki at the very beginning of the series, where she would always call Ichigo a fool, and was threatening to. She said that she would kill him, if she was allowed to, right? So perhaps that's maybe more fitting in with the kind of attitudes that Soul Reapers have. Anyway, um, this yes here is not yes that she likes him, but her kind of answering like yes, like being addressed like, "Hey Rukia," being like, "Yeah," that kind of thing. I don't really read it as a yes I like him or anything like that. Now she is dodgy about this, about like just being friends, and you could read that as maybe she has more romantic feelings. The obvious reading, though, that isn't that, is that clearly she is a Soul Reaper trading him to be like a Soul Reaper on his own as well, right? Their connection is way different from being friends, but she has to put on this act of just being friends because she has to kind of excuse the fact that they're always kind of around each other, right? And that she could be around him at school. Nevertheless, we get a little bit of Mahana, who is a character that I don't think we've really had a speaking role from before. Uh, we had Michiru and Chizuru before. Kind of all we've seen all these girls. Notably, Rio doesn't actually say really anything in this scene. She kind of keeps to herself. But it's kind of neat that we get all the kind of girl characters that we've really seen at Karakura High all together in one scene here. And of course, it's like in this last scene that Rukia has before she's pretty much leaving, right, trying to run away or being apprehended by Soul Society. So it's like this, like one last moment that she gets to really spend with her human peers in a way. Of course, it gets brought up, everything with Orihime and Orihime being kind of involved with Ichigo and having these romantic feelings about him. Uh, and, obviously, the real thrust of this, as much as it gets into these gags and has these characters kind of joking around, and, the idea of like who's going after Ichigo and all of that being a thing. The kind of significant thing here is the kind of there's two things really happening. There's one, showing these characters in a kind of lighthearted, sort of fun situation as they talk about guys, and they bicker back and forth, and they get involved in each other's personal lives, and like the idea of that is that Rukia is like actually forming these connections with these other people, right? That she's being involved in this kind of silly fun scenario, something that she might not be allowed to have happen whenever she is in Soul Society. But also the idea is that her relationship with Ichigo is being really questioned. Not so much like as a romantic relationship, but the connection that she has to Ichigo, a connection that she feels like she has to sever now to protect him, right? And it's no surprise that, every time that we get Rukia talking about this connection to Ichigo, it's always on a page turn, and then we have a big moment from her, just like we had her like spitting out her juice in the previous one. We have her saying that he's just a friend here. And that just a friend thing, it's not that she has a romantic link to him. It's that she's trying to protect the more serious connection that she has to Ichigo with saving his life, giving him her powers, nurturing him as a Soul Reaper, helping him get like revenge on Grand Fisher, supporting him in all those different ways. This is the sort of thing that she's kind of going to have to say to Soul Society, right? Whenever they question her about Ichigo, one, she doesn't even want them to know that Ichigo exists, that Ichigo has her powers, like, right? She tries to obfuscate that a lot. But also, here we really get the sense that she's kind of putting up that front that we've seen from her before, right? Whenever Ruki is around other people, she really puts on this kind of fake pleasant face, right? Um, does curtsies and all of that, but she's really a little bit more severe than that, and this is just kind of a way that she uses to sort of protect Ichigo, or to protect the connection that she has to Ichigo. So here, obviously she's just insisting on, yeah, she's just his friend, because obviously she isn't romantically linked, and she's not going to tell these random humans, yeah, like all this supernatural stuff, right? But same thing goes for if she were to be questioned from Soul Society, right? She would insist that she has kind of a casual, like, not intimate, not serious relationship with Ichigo, that he's just a human, right? Uh, that she doesn't have a significant kind of relationship with him, is the idea. This downplaying of their relationship, this insistence on it being insignificant in order to kind of protect the truth from other people. But also, we get this internalization from Rukia, where she's thinking about love and romance and kind of friendship and affection, and that stuff is kind of useless or boring. And I don't think that's really the case, that she really thinks that. I think this is her reiterating it to herself as she tries to kind of mentally put herself back into where, a lot of the Soul Reapers are, the attitudes that she had as a Soul Reaper. I do like that we get all the different girl characters kind of looking back at her. We, of course, Rio is here just reading in this scene, but we also, of course, we know that we've had everybody else here: Orihime, Tatsuki, Mahana, Michiru, and Chizuru. But yeah, they kind of question her, and she insists, like, obviously she doesn't really have any sort of attachment to him, right? But I think the idea is less about like love and romance, and more like these feelings of attachment, right? Because the idea is that she doesn't want to feel attached, or want to feel this affection or friendship or this connection to all of these people, not just Ichigo, but especially Ichigo, this attachment that she has to him. If she could tell herself that it's boring, if she could tell herself that it's useless, that it's meaningless, that it's a needless emotion, then she can function better as a Soul Reaper, and she can kind of detach herself from this human life that she has been living. And I think that's really like the big highlight between the difference between these Soul Reapers and the humans. At least, here at the beginning of the series, we get this sense that Soul Reapers, yeah, they feel emotions and things, and they're perfectly capable of this. But a human life is one in which those emotions are maybe more kind of at the forefront, whereas the Soul Reaper, you see that stuff as not being maybe worthwhile pursuits, or maybe being boring. Certainly in the case of Rukia, she feels like that must be how she has to be a Soul Reaper. um I like the joke that we have here of Orihime saying it's disappointing because if they could gang up on him, they definitely win. I think that's kind of a cute joke, right? As Tatsuki tries to explain, that's not really how it works. And then Chizuru takes exactly the opposite and gets stomped violently by Tatsuki. Uh, Chizuru is a bit extreme in her own ways, but geez, Tatsuki's response is always violence. Anyway, this is a moment that I really do think kind of illustrates. Hey, illustrates. I'm talking about the art, so that's why I'm laughing here. But this is a moment in the art that I think illustrates exactly the sort of thing that I wish that we would have seen in some of those earlier chapters, whenever there would be blank panels and a character kind of talking about a thing. Instead, we have like actually that moment illustrated here, where she's talking about, like, Ruki is having these internalizations about, you know, if I've got to leave, then I shouldn't make friends. I shouldn't have these affections. I shouldn't really care about friendship, as she sees, all these people interacting, in these kind of, sure, like they're like fighting back and forth, but they're having fun. They're being friends, um, all of that. Like, and she kind of has a smile because she realizes that she does have that connection to these people, right? And that she did get to have, even if she's telling herself it's going to be boring, she did get to have these sort of connections. It's somewhat of a pained expression because she knows that she's going to have to leave, but like we do see her laughing and she's actually having fun. And so the idea is that, like, she insists, like, oh yeah, this is definitely really boring. This is terrible. You shouldn't be friends with people. But like, she actually does enjoy it, right? So we have this kind of crisis that she's going through where she knows that having all these attachments is only going to make things harder, and she knows that feeling all these emotions and kind of making these connections and having these sort of affections, that's not the sort of thing that will help her at all in soul society, right? It's a little bit more grave and serious there. She does mention jealousy, right? And I'm not quite sure. Obviously, whatever we're connecting to this previous scene, we're talking about like this competition over Ichigo's affection, and Orihime's affection, and this idea of maybe being jealous of one another. I don't know exactly where that kind of plays into Rukia, because I don't really read it as Rukia having like actual romantic feelings for Ichigo. But whenever I think about like jealousy, I think maybe more in the vein of Ruki has been spending all this time with Ichigo, and you have Renji who might be jealous of her, right? Uh, but I'm not quite sure exactly where to connect that line about jealousy. But it all kind of comes to a point here where she insists that, back in the current moment, because she's been reflecting on that previous one, that none of those emotions are necessary for a Soul Reaper, right? That they're all burdens. That for a Soul Reaper, essentially, you have to defeat these hollows. You have to do battle. You have to not have these connections, because the connections that you have to other people, they might die. Those people might become hollows, and then you might have to fight them as a hollow, right? So if anything, those kind of connections, that humanity, might be used against you. And we've seen the ways in which hollows will manipulate people's humanity and use their humanity against them. And so it becomes kind of like a sort of interesting thing where if our antagonists are going to leverage our humanity against us, then should we throw our humanity away? Should we be less human so that we are less vulnerable? And certainly the Shinigami way of thinking is that, yeah, being human is kind of pathetic, that it's something to be looked down upon. And obviously, I think Ichigo kind of champions the opposite, that these connections to other people are what make you strong, that these human emotions are valid and important, and that it's our humanity that's going to allow us to stand up against these antagonists. So yeah, we'll see that kind of thematically throughout Bleach. Is this kind of struggle over, one's humanity and the necessity of it, and how much that humanity kind of might compromise or might embolden and strengthen somebody. I mean, it's fairly standard stuff for shonen manga in general, right? As you talk about these kind of powers that are inhuman and how they might, threaten people, and then the idea of like, well, it's your humanity that shines through and then, helps you out, because obviously we can connect to the person who's championing humanity, right? Anyway, um, yeah, she kind of course, reflects outwardly, right, that she might have stayed in this world too long, right? That she's starting to kind of take on all these burdensome emotions, right? These needless and burdensome feelings, and Renji, of course, just confirms that as she finally realizes that he's actually there. Even though she's been running this entire time, again, I kind of read that as she's just trying to flee town, that she's trying to get as far away from Karakura as possible, Ichigo as possible, and she feels like maybe she might get captured eventually, but you know, if she can avoid dragging other people's in the conflict, that's all for the better, right? Or, avoid getting captured whatsoever. It's the kind of thing where you try to run away and to protect other people, but also perhaps to protect yourself. Fantastic shot of Renji, by the way. Love this with him drawing his Zanpakuto. Him, again, our two icons of Bleach, really three if you want to think about the Soul Reaper themselves and their robes, their soul cutters, their Zanpakuto, right? If you want to consider the Soul Reaper itself as kind of iconic to Bleach, right? This is really just like stacking iconography on top of iconography, right? We get the moon above Renji, who is this Soul Reaper who is perched atop this power line, right? So, kind of visually a lot, really cool moments, but yeah, I think this visual really sells like Renji as this supernatural threat kind of descending upon Rukia, right? Fantastic stuff, and like the way that he's lit, the shadows cast over him. It's a great moment. Um, but yeah, he he has this kind of really smug. He's always got this toothy kind of grin on him. We're starting to get more of an idea of who Renji really is, right? Abarai Renji, or Renji Abarai, if you were to read it like English. First name obviously is his personal name is Renji. Abarai is his family name. Um, but the idea is that she stayed too long here in the human world. It's only been 2 months, right? The entirety of the last year of this manga. About 50 chapters, right? There's about 50 weeks in a year, so on and so forth. Obviously, there will be some weeks whenever manga's not published, like I think Golden Week typically is that you get a skip on, but not a lot, Anyway, but this idea that Rukia lived a little bit longer than she would have. So the idea is, as much as they're saying capture or kill, I think the idea is, of course, that Rukia is eventually going to be killed. That she's either going to be captured and executed, or she's going to be killed here on the spot. So we get the lethal sort of, promise of, I guess, punishment or jurisdiction being kind of laid down upon her. And like I said, that's even present in chapter 1, right? Whenever we got the establishment that Soul Society was a place in which people that are criminals do get executed, right? So we had this expectation, um, even if it was minor or maybe in the back of our heads, or if we just had all the elements there to put it all together. But it seems as though this has finally come for Rukia. And, Rukia, of course, confirms that it is, in fact, Renji. We get this shot of, everything kind of blurring, which is like this bit of action as Renji kind of descends and takes this slice at her. But also, you can also read that as like his spiritual pressure kind of spiking too, right? We got a little bit of that in the Minos encounter. But yeah, Rugi is surprised that it is in fact Renji that has come. Um, and of course, Renji takes this time to insult Rukia. I mean, she's kind of having a serious, kind of grave moment here. She realizes exactly the forces that have been sent for her, but he insists that, like, it's only taken these few months. Yeah, a couple of months. I think it's been exactly 2, right? But the idea that she's an Igi guy and she's completely lost her edge, she didn't notice them, so on and so forth, right? That she's really fallen from grace in a lot of ways, and we get this kind of reiteration of, again, what's important to Soul Reapers, what they value, right? And so they must value power and having this edge and being aware, all the things that Rukia put kind of emphasis on earlier in the manga for teaching Ichigo, right? uh yeah, Renji kind of having this like kind of scowling upper lip deal to him. Again, that's kind of why I read him a little sort of Japanese gangstery. He certainly has that sensation to him. That he's this sort of swaggering, sort of like, hey, guy. um, but I think his expressions really sell him, as well as the poses that we get to see him in. The sort of hand on his hip, sword over his shoulder deal. In a lot of ways, he is kind of meant to mirror Ichigo, because Ichigo is, of course, this kind of gangster character in a lot of ways too. But for Ichigo, we see him as maybe less violent, less openly kind of forward and rash, less indoctrinated by Soul Society. So in a lot of ways, Renji does end up kind of being a parallel to Ichigo, uh, but we'll see more of that, of course. Initially here, obviously, there is clearly kind of a distinction to be drawn, as he is much more in the vein of being this hunter from Soul Society. Rukia tries to kind of give that, right where we saw before, where she was like, "Oh, we're just friends," right? She's trying to feed that same sort of line here to Renji, right? That, oh, my powers weren't stolen. How dare you suggest a human could take them from me, right? It's this. She's lying about this because she doesn't want Ichigo to be involved or implicated here, right? And of course, Renji calls out this human expression she has on her face. And again, I think it's a little bit like hypocritical because certainly the expressions that Renji and Byakuya have are expressions that humans definitely could have. But the idea is that she wears her emotions more readily, perhaps. That she is maybe more outwardly sentimental. I don't know. You know, it's the idea at the very least is that she comes off as more human now. That she's more aligned with humans than she is with the perhaps cold or calculating nature of these Soul Reapers, or even predatory in Renji's. And whenever I say predatory, I mean like he's this is very kind of even though he's like grinning or whatever, he's here on a hunt, you know. Anyway, we get this bit from Renji where he expresses that he grew up in the Rukon district, so assumably a district of Soul Society, right? But he was taken in by the illustrious and noble Kuchiki family, and we had perhaps a hint at that with the way in which everybody at Urahara shop sort of deferred to Rukia as like Miss Kuchiki and all of that. But here, we get really confirmation that the Kochiki family is this noble family, right? They're illustrious. And that, Rukia was trained to be a Soul Reaper, and so she's not allowed to wear this human expression, right? That it's maybe beneath her. As we get, of course, Renji coming to strike her with his weapon. We get kind of close up look on his sword. He has this kind of jagged lightning bolt pattern that's his tattoos and hair almost are very similar to, right? So again, the idea of the Zanpakuto being kind of personalized or unique to the user is brought up. I mentioned before Kubo was really aware of the physicality of these characters' weapons, and so that's something to kind of keep in mind and pay attention to is how much like again, even though these characters all have the same sort of outfits, like these Shinigami, we could definitely tell a lot from them from these little accessories and these other things about them, or their swords especially, right? Um, and of course, Rukia is even more shocked whenever Captain Kuchiki gets brought up, right? Her brother, Byakuya, who is, not having any of this. And we finally get a good shot of him where, he is this kind of tall, lean figure, very serious expression. Um, his hair is done up in these weird noodle things. I think the idea with the hair noodles, at least, is to really sell this as somebody from this other culture, that is maybe prim and proper to a degree, right? That he's done up in a way, but that he has this sort of nobility to him almost, if that makes sense. Of course, the scarf helps to sell that, this long flowing scarf that he's wearing, and then his sword is this. He's got a kind of interesting hilt here where it's this square shape, but it's also empty on the insides as it's connected. So it's, unlike Renji's, which is maybe a little bit more, jagged and frantic and lightning like, right? Uh, Byakuya's is uniform in design and has this structure to it that makes it seem perhaps a little bit more orderly, like he is, right? But we get a full page reveal of course, Byakuya here and Rukia responding, and of course the reveal is that he is Rukia's brother. Um, and yeah, even though he's here to kind of either execute her, or capture her, he's just got this sort of detached sense about him. Very different from, of course, Renji, right? Like I said, the two are meant to be juxtaposed. They're coupled together because the one helps to make the other more exaggerated by simply being there. Um, and as Rukia is distracted, she gets attacked by Renji, skids to the side, and we get a reiteration of the fact that, of course, transferring your soul reaper abilities is a grave offense, um, and that they were entrusted with this instead of just the police, so that perhaps, others would be sent. But because these two have maybe more of a personal connection to her, that Rinji was one that was taken in by the Kuchiki family, and that Byakuya, being the male Kuchiki and a captain, is perhaps the patriarch of this family. If not, then he's the noble sort of son, like either prince or king, so to speak, of this noble family. So these people with clear social standing, but also connection to Rugia were sent. There was kind enough to send them to entrust them with her execution, right? And here we get the reiteration of the use of execution. We also get the idea that, of course, the transferring of her abilities is a grave offense, one that merits execution, right? Like, this was sort of brought up pretty early on. Obviously, Urahara never mentioned it really, but considering whenever Ichigo, and like this is like in chapter 2 or so, Ichigo mentions that Rukia was doing stuff that was outside of just like what was expected from a Shinigami, right? That she threw away her life more or less and transferred her powers, even though she shouldn't have. And so Bleach has kind of kept this close to its chest, so to speak. Like it really hasn't been brought up elsewhere, but the idea of transferring her powers being the executable offense, not to mention all the other stuff that Ruki is being involved in, right, with the mod soul and everything else. Um, but it was that moment that was executable. So if you go back and you look at chapter 2 and you really look at like Ichigo really drilling Rukia for doing all of these things that weren't her duty, but because she had this connection to other people, you can really kind of see that she realizes how much she really has done on behalf of Ichigo, and kind of the fact that she's kind of messed up, but also that she kind of aligns with Ichigo's mentality, that she has this connection to other people, and that she's willing to kind of go that extra mile and not just be bound by the letter of the law. And of course, the idea is, she's trying to protect Ichigo, but they want to go and kill him, right? So we get this, not just this threat for Rukia, right, that she's going to be executed, but that Ichigo also will be killed. We get more of Renji being, finally a little bit more serious, not so much of that grin of his, but that he's insisting that, she didn't invade, that he actually was kind of pulling his punches. And as he goes in for this actual like kill, right? That this time he'll actually attack her because he wants to threaten her to give up Ichigo. We get into the cut of the next page where some attack comes his way, he dodges it just barely, and of course Ishida is there, right? So I kind of like that moment that we build up this kind of really tense moment where it's established that yes, this guy is a threat. Not to even mention Byakuya, who hasn't even drawn his sword, but just Renji himself is sort of like this almost like a dog Byakuya brought with him to gnash at her heels. And now he's really being set loose against her. And this is where, of course, right before that can happen, right before he can really bring his weapon down, he gets interrupted by uh, what's his name? Uryu, right? I love that Uryu, like two armed men against a defenseless girl. What's this world coming to? And we get reiteration of the Quincy Archer hates you bit, right? The I'm just a classmate that hates Soul Reapers. So kind of cool moment from Uryu, of course. He's just getting groceries in the middle of the night, I guess, going to the 7-Eleven or something. Um, it's kind of interesting here that even though he has his weapon out and everything, he's not called out as a Quincy. So you have to wonder if just like Rukia, maybe Renji's not aware of the Quincy. It's not explicitly stated like a Quincy or anything like that. It's just like, who are you? So kind of interesting there. If we assume Renji to be a peer of Rukia's, perhaps he is within like that, around 150 years old age, so he might not even be aware of Quincy, just like Rukia kind of wasn't. But, there's not a lot of information here to really draw a conclusion one way or the other. We'll just have to see as we go forward. But that's it for this chapter. As far as how I feel about it, obviously, I'm gonna like this one. You can probably tell from how much I went into the art and the narrative beats that I really feel like a lot of those work in a lot of ways. Um, I think ultimately this chapter does a lot to really present us where Rukia is mentally and to sell these characters as a threat to kind of build up both Renji and Byakuya in ways that I feel are pretty effective. And then, we're also kind of building the world as well as we're really getting confirmation on a lot of stuff that was more subtle. All these kind of hints about Soul Society and Rukia's execution, all of that was there throughout this first arc of Bleach, especially in those early chapters. But like I said, it was subtle. The focus was more on we've got to fight these hollows, you got to protect your family, all of that stuff. So a lot of the little kind of hints that we've had scattered about are finally culminating here. I think this does a really good job of affirming a lot of that stuff that we had, maybe the suspicions that we had about what was going on, and then building forward. Also, I think just artistically, this chapter does a lot to really, again, sell these characters to give us this impression of who Renji is, who Byakuya is, these characters as serious threats. There's just a lot done in the posing, the expressions, the design of these characters. I think is really strong. The fact, again, I talk about like character design and all of that, silhouette, etc. It's really important to be able to tell who a character is. And the fact that you can, obviously you saw them in the previous chapter, so it's a little bit easier. And without any context, I don't know that I'd be able to tell you that this is Renji with him crouched down like that, just getting to see a little bit of his hair. But I could certainly tell you that this is Byakuya just by like his stance, the scarf, everything else. But yeah, there's like kind of, really, really, really interesting, really, really neat moment here. Obviously, things are kind of coming to a head with a different kind of enemy. We've been focused so much on Hollows as a threat, so the switch to Shinigami being a threat is really kind of interesting because so far Shinigami have really been, our protagonist, right, Rukia and Ichigo, and it isn't really until Ishida is introduced that Shinigami being anything other than protagonist is brought up. So the idea that Soul Reaper Shinigami could be an actual threat is something that we kind of have, we've had in the back of our heads perhaps the entire time. It becomes more of a thing during the entire, arc with Ishida, right? But then after that, here it really is comes and like solidifies, right? We really get these actual threats from Shinigami. So it's a real payoff to a lot of what we've gotten so far, and I think it effectively pays that off. I also like in a lot of ways that Uryu is the first one to show up instead of Ichigo. I think that makes it kind of a more compelling sort of encounter, right? Because what's Uryu's connection to Rukia at all, right? You know, there's not a ton there, so we get to see a lot from this character in a way that connects him in these ways that aren't just to Ichigo alone, which might be the only connection that he might have otherwise. So that's cool too. And obviously there's all this stuff with the Soul Reapers, and clearly he's seeing like this friend of his, even if it's just a new friendship or somebody that he knows is close to Ichigo, but being attacked by Soul Reapers, and he doesn't want that to come to pass. So it's all good stuff. I think I don't have really any complaints. I think the art is on like as best as it's ever been really in this chapter. We get a lot of really expressive moments from these characters, and just like the way that the shading is used here, I love like all this nighttime lighting that we get the glow of the moon here on the side of this power line, and there's just like a lot done just artistically to really sell these moments too. So it's great. I like this chapter. I think it's a fantastic chapter, and I'm a big fan of it. Hopefully you are too. But let me know what you think about it. What are your thoughts on this chapter? Do you think maybe there should have been more in some capacity here or there? How do you feel about like this kind of scene with Rukia that she's flashing back to? These other kind of connections. What are you seeing? And if you see anything that I don't, either in the art or the narrative, feel free to point it out in the comments. As always, for spoilers, make sure that you tag your spoilers. We'll be talking about spoilers now and how this connects to the rest of the manga. Getting ahead of myself. So, spoilers, right? Connections. Obviously, we've talked about Renji and Byakuya kind of being overkill for perhaps capturing Rukia, especially with her and the Gi guy. We get this flashback here to, whether or not Rukia actually has romantic feelings for Ichigo. As we come to find out, obviously, she ends up with Renji, so maybe the idea of jealousy being tied to Renji being jealous as Ichigo is perhaps a thing. Though it doesn't make a lot of sense since they're so much older, but, maybe maturity-wise, they're not quite there. Who knows? I talked a lot about this in my analysis, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time really talking about her connection to Ichigo or anything like that. But I think this idea of like putting up a front, or not really, trying to protect other people or whatever, and behaving in a way that's counter to how you actually behave, is something that we see a lot in Byakuya, right? Where he behaves in all these ways that he feels are like noble or upholding Soul Society, but don't really reflect his emotions. And he kind of learns through his connection with Ichigo and Rukia to be a little bit more honest and to go off of what he's feeling more. Of course, we get this interaction about like both of them going after Ichigo so that they can win. So yet more iteration of Orihime going for Ichigo, right? I kind of wish in the 10 years after stuff we maybe got confirmation for which one of these girls Chizuru ends up with. My money's on Rio. They're already hanging out at her house, you know. But maybe not. Anyway, yeah, we get confirmation, right, that she stayed here too long. All of that. I think the bigger, kind of more significant thing here is that he says that she's an Igi guy, but it only took a couple months to lose her edge, and that raises a few questions, right? Because as we come to learn, after the Soul Society arc, during the invasion arc, Rukia shows up to help out against Grimjow and his Fraction, right? And she uses her Shikai and freezes D-Roy Ritter, right, or Rinker, whatever his name is. I think it's Rinker. Anyway, D-Roy. Well, I only remember because he shows up that so early in Bleach anyway. He's like one of the first. We see Ice Ringer and D-Roy. Those are like the first Arankar that we see. But anyway, so you have to wonder if she was capable of Shikai beforehand. But then if she was, like, why did she get wrecked so hard by, like by this crummy ass Fishbone D, right? So, people will always bring that up as kind of an inconsistency, and I don't really see it as that, because it's like, well, obviously she got beat by Fishbone D because she wasn't fighting to defeat it, she was trying to protect Ichigo, and she had too much kind of going on mentally. Obviously, for the story, it doesn't really work if she doesn't lose to Fishbone D anyway. But I think the idea is that the only reason that she took a critical wound in that fight is that she jumped in the way to save Ichigo's life. That if Ichigo wasn't a factor, she wouldn't have had a problem. In a lot of ways, I think this is reflective of the fact that Rukia has been kind of trained to fight hollows, but not to protect other people. And then whenever she starts to kind of protect other people, that's whenever it compromises her own life, because she hasn't really learned to fight in that way. I don't know that I really buy that she would have had Shikai at that point, but it doesn't make sense for her to release Shikai against a regular ass Hollow anyway. So maybe she did. Maybe she was just practicing it, right? But she didn't really have as much control over it as perhaps she needed to. Plus, why would she use Shikai in front of a bunch of humans anyway? Um, you know, there's a lot of reasons for her not to use Shikai in that first fight if she had it capable of it. But I don't really read it as her being capable of using the Shikai then anyway. I think it's something that she kind of developed perhaps more. And I don't read it as, I'll have to wait until we get to that invasion arc. I don't see that as the first time ever using it there, but certainly maybe the first time that she's used it in a serious battle rather than a training environment, maybe. Anyway, there's as we come to find out, there's a lot of rules about like how much Shinigami are really even allowed to use their power whenever they're in the human realm or not, right? Um, so there's stuff there, but as far as like completely losing her edge, there's this idea of her being an Ikigai, right, which tries to kind of limit you to human capabilities anyway. Um, but we've already gotten all this stuff about her losing her edge, her the ski guy kind of draining or sapping her powers, right? That she's not back to having regained her powers whatsoever, even though naturally she kind of should have. And again, I believe that's because Urahara created the specific Gigai for her in order to kind of keep her from ever redeveloping those powers, because the idea was that perhaps he was able to, if should everything work out, he might be able to keep her in the human world and, safe perhaps from Aizen. Who knows, right? Um, Maybe it would have quelled the Higekio and destroyed it in some other way too. I don't know. Anyway, certainly it would keep her from like developing her spiritual powers and therefore being able to be spiritually sensed by these other people. Maybe, I don't know. I gotta wonder why this specific Gigai was made for Rukia outside of stuff with related to the Higekio. Anyway, um, yeah, the whole thing with like this kind of disparity between humanity and the Soul Reapers, and like this them kind of looking down, that's something that I feel in a lot of ways sort of gets dropped moving forward. Um, but it's important to remember, it's something that like it's easy to not think about during the Soul Society arc, and especially forward. But that like these that they are completely a different, like, not race of people, but they consider themselves so different class wise, or whatever, that emotionally they're so kind of on this other strange level or whatever it is. So I don't know. It's something that, like I said, it's easy to forget about. But if you consider this, it's easy to see where characters like Aizen might arise, right? I talked about in the analysis how these characters manipulate sort of others, and really use their humanity as something to sort of weaken them or to unmake them or whatever. They kind of manipulate other people's emotions to see that as weakness, and you certainly get that from Aizen. Anyway, um, here we get Kuchiki being captain, but he doesn't have the captain's robes on. I guess that's something that maybe we don't really have this early on. Certainly, we didn't see Yukatake in captain's robes, and I think in interviews, Kubo said that like even the idea of the Gote 13 and the hierarchy that isn't within it wasn't something that he had clearly in mind at the very beginning of the series. He just knew that there were Soul Reapers, right? So that's something that's still kind of being developed in a lot of ways. Here we get the sense that he is a captain, but all the hallmarks that come with being a captain are a lieutenant, right? Having like the badge as well as the robes and everything is something that we haven't seen yet. And that way, it's interesting. I wonder if the captain's robes were meant specifically to kind of, they're designed that way because maybe they mirror Kisuke's own sort of outfit. Rather than it being the other way around, where Kisuke's outfit is meant to be kind of reflective of captain robes in a way. Maybe captain robes were designed specifically to kind of be more evocative of Kisuke's. Who knows? Um, chicken and egg sort of situation, maybe. Anyway, um, yeah, this line being kind of, the high ones were kind enough to entrust us with the execution instead of the police. Again, I talked about that last time in the spoilers, like why Renji and Byakuya could be sent, but obviously they were sent, by Aizen specifically because they had this connection to Rukia. So, um, there was this expectation that, that someone else might be sent, but Aizen is the one that ordered them there. Anyway, um, don't have a lot of other kind of connection. You know, I don't know that I have really anything to say about Uryu. If this ends up being kind of structurally a thing of like Uryu coming to someone's aid. It is interesting that Uryu is the first to sort of fight Renji and interrupt and fight, like get encountered with Renji, and then they end up pairing up later in the Wake Up Mundo arc, right? Whenever they go to rescue Orihime. So that's cool that like they start off again, trying to say names here. Ishida is very much the type that like he starts off as an antagonist with people and then ends up pairing up with them. So it's kind of neat that we got that with Ichigo, and here we're getting that with Renji even. So kind of cool. Small connection there, but neat nevertheless. Um, yeah, Renji's always paired up against people who are way stronger than he is. Maybe not with Uryu here right now, but like I'm trying to think of the kind of fights that Renji has to undergo, where he has to fight. Oof, God, there's a lot of different. Maybe not all of them. I'm just trying to think of every single fight that Renji's been in. I'm trying to say like he fights a lot of people with projectiles, but that's not even the case because sure he fights Uryu here and he has the later battles with Byakuya, but he ends up fighting some pretty physical fighters too in Ilfort and Master Masculine. Um, anyway, and then the kind of weird fight that he has later with boy Cesare Laporo. So yeah, I don't know that I can make any like larger connections. Renji just ends up being in a lot of fights that are kind of over his head. I think this is maybe one of the few times where he actually has the advantage. Anyway, that's it for this one. Hopefully you enjoyed it. I enjoyed reading it. I enjoyed this volume. I'll see you for volume 7 in the next video. But as always, this has been Carker Gold. Feel free to leave a comment on this video if you have anything that you notice, any connections that you see. Definitely make sure you tag them as a spoiler, first and foremost. But as always, spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.